Just wait for a sec. I will be with you guys. I'm going to ask if you would kindly, if you're able to mute yourself, because there are some extraneous noises, and I really want to be the only extraneous noise, at least for a short period of time. Thank you so very much, and thank you for being with me this morning. I sent out, with the help of Jen and Lisa, uh, two attachments in terms of when you got the teaser this morning with the click to join the link. One of them is something that some of you may have seen before, and we'll talk about it later, but it's a list of to-dos. The second one is something I was tearing up. Should I change the topic today to Ukraine? And should I, shouldn't I? And I made the decision to share with you something that I think is very important. It is about 21 minutes long, and it is a sermon from Rabbi David Volpe that he gave last Shabbat in LA. It was shared through a different source and being broadly, it's basically a historic primer on the Jewish story there. And many of us have some connections and have heard in our family history about the Ukraine as being where we're from. The truth is that Jews were never really from anywhere because they were never given full citizenship. And the story on the borders is always very, very fluid. And if it was Poland at one moment, it could have very well been the Ukraine or Belarus or Lithuania or Latvia or Slovakia in another moment. So this is for most of us on this particular Zoom, this is part of our family story, if not a great part of our family story. As I wrote in the teaser, the difference between those folks and us is very probably that our great grandmas got on the boat and theirs didn't. So it's just in terms of those of you who I know who are my students love learning. And as you probably have figured out, I love teaching. And this particular topic is extremely timely and just part of the story in what's going on there. Our prayers are very much another part of the story. And at some level, a serious shout out and feeling of Jewish pride for the President Zelensky, who it is a miracle that a Jew is president of the Ukraine if you understand the history of the Ukrainian history. And the fact that he is such a mensch is also an incredible shout out to us. I wish there are a few stories. There's one in Atlantic Monthly, there's one in Washington Post, but the most part in the general press, that particular positive element of him, which would help all of us in this fight against anti-Semitic perceptions, is not really shared. So I know that you know, and I know that I know, and I'm just using this few moments to give a little bit of background because we're all focused on that. But it's really not the business of the day. I also want to thank the people who heeded my thing about putting a name on your Zoom screen. It's something that's difficult for everyone who teaches on Zoom to be talking to a phone number. It's bad enough, especially if you don't have because people choose to blank out, not have their not see. And I was on a Zoom last week where someone made the pitch, and I said, I'm going to do that too. Please make it easier for me if you possibly can. If this goes through lunch, I don't mind if you feel uncomfortable that you black yourself out and eat lunch while we're talking. You can eat lunch. I'm happy to see you eating lunch. Maybe even I would eat lunch if I saw you guys eating lunch. But having said that, just the fact that it's when you can, if you could possibly put, your name as opposed to just a phone number, so I have a clue on who you guys, who I'm speaking to. It just makes the connection a little bit easier. Our next class is April the 12th, by the way, right before Passover. So let's get to the business at hand. And when I wrote this little blurb, I knew it was timely because the topic of anti-Semitism is always timely. On the other hand, I had no clue that it would be this timely. There's pretty much scary news every week. I'm going to give a summary of the latest, but I also really want to educate you in terms of the psychology of anti-Semitism, the history of the anti-Semitism. Let me see if I'm able to mute everybody since um, now I'm an important leader of this. Maybe I'm able to do that so we can, yes, okay, got it. I think that should solve that problem for now. Um, it's it's timely. It's more timely than I could ever have dreamed of. So I'm going to start with a screen share. One of the organizations that has been, let me collapse this so you can see it better. Um, Everybody see? Yes? Okay. Uh, One of the organizations that has been at the forefront of activity, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, has been the American Jewish Committee, the AJC. They have been magnificent leaders and advocates and done things. One of the things that just I'm going to give you a taste of right now is a survey, a very recent survey, I believe it was last November, of American Jews. Well, September, October, it came out in November. Just a few slides. It's long. If you want to go to it, I'd be happy. You can find it through the ajc.org, or you can email or text me and I'll be happy to give you the link. But 1 in 4 American Jews have been the target of anti-Semitism over the past year. That's from the end of 20 to the end of 21. 4 in 10 American Jews have changed their behavior over the past 12 months out of fear of anti-Semitism. And nearly 4 in 10 American Jews say that they've avoided at least one of the 3 behaviors asked about. Avoided certain places or events out of fear, avoiding making themselves visually identifiable, or refrain from posted Jewish related content online. I'm not going to ask anybody to go public, but I'm going to ask you to take a few seconds to introspect and see if maybe if they had asked you, you would have put yourself in one or more of these categories. I'm going to be doing quite a bit of reading today from other sources because these words matter and I can't do it anywhere near as well as these sources have done it. Listen closely. This is Bret Stephens' New York Times. Colleyville. A man travels 4,800 miles from the north of England to the heart of Texas. Once there, appearing to be homeless, he gains entry into a synagogue. The rabbi welcomes him with a cup of tea. With a handgun, he takes the rabbi and the others hostage for 11 hours while demanding the release of a convicted terrorist held in a nearby prison. He phones a prominent New York rabbi to call President Biden and help push for the terrorist's release. A hostage reports him as saying, "I know President Biden will do things for the Jews." A witness who sees the drama on live screen watches him ranting about Jews and Israel and saying he has chosen his target because America only cares about Jewish lives. Anti-Semitism, you would think that it couldn't be more obvious. But first you'd have to climb over a strange wall of misdirection and doubt. He was singularly focused on one issue, and it was not related to the Jewish community. But we are continuing to work to find the motive, an FBI special agent in charge said. That was shortly after the standoff. Both the AP and the BBC parroted the line: Texas synagogue hostage standoff not related to Jewish community. Finally, 4 or 5 days later, on Thursday, the FBI director finally acknowledged that it was an anti-Semitic attack. Yet the only substantial reporting that I found, this is the author of this, Bret Stephens, that I found from a major American news organization that explicitly acknowledges the anti-Semitic nature of the attack, was one story in the Washington Post. Instead, there was a focus on the assailant's supposed mental illness, along with additional reporting on the ever-increasing security consciousness of synagogues worldwide. Compare that with the mountains of reporting regarding the anti-Asian hate that allegedly animated the killer of last year's attack in the Atlanta area massage parlors. Or compare it with the coverage of the unquestionably racist shooting in Charleston's Emmanuel Methodist Episcopal Church. For that matter, compare it with the naked Jew hatred that drove the killer in 2018 synagogue massacre in Pittsburgh, which has been extensively reported and discussed, and reported that his immediate motive was opposition to immigration. With the media's strange pattern of omission, Jews are victimized twice. First, by being physically assaulted for being Jewish. Second, by being begrudged the universal recognition that we were targeted. And how can it be, in this era of heightened sensitivity to every kind of hatred and bias and stereotype and phobia, that there's so much dismissing, ignoring, and outright denying when it comes to calling out bias aimed at Jews? The answer begins with the nature of anti-Semitism, which some perpetuate and others participate in, often unwittingly, and a still greater number fail to recognize it for what it is. What we generally call anti-Semitism is a 19th century coinage that helped turn an ancient religious hatred into a racial hatred. As racial hatred came to be considered uncouth after World War II, anti-Zionism, which we define as blanket opposition to the existence of a Jewish state, not criticism of an Israeli policy. When anti-Zionism became a more acceptable way of opposing Jewish political interests and denigrating Jews. Should Israel cease to exist, new forms of bigotry will surely develop for the next stage of anti-Judaism, adapted from the prevailing beliefs at that time. A common denominator in each of these mutations is an idea based in fantasy and conspiracy about Jewish power. The old-fashioned religious anti-Semite believed Jews had the power to kill Christ. These forerunners to the Nazis believed Jews had the power to start wars, manipulate kings, swindle the native people of all of their possessions. Present-day anti-Zionists attribute to Israel and its supporters in the United States vast powers that they do not possess, like the power to draw America into war. On the far right, anti-Semites think that Jews are engaged in an immense scheme to replace white, working-class America with immigrant labor. Tucker Carlson and others have taken this conspiracy theory mainstream. The man who attacked the synagogue entertained the same type of fantasy. The assailant took Jews hostage because that's where the power is. The FBI's moral idiocy, there are no other words for it, in denying the specific anti-Semitic nature of the attack, lies in the idea that he could have imagined himself choosing just about any means to achieve his end, like taking hostages at the nearest convenience store. Similarly, the focus on his mental health evades the central fact that, crazy or not, his malice was not random. He pointed his gun at Jews. The fantasy about Jewish power may seem outlandish, but it's far more pervasive than you think, which gets to the point of people participating in anti-Semitism even when they aren't knowingly perpetuating it. Who, for instance, is more responsible for devising the war in Iraq? If your first answer is Wolfowitz, Faith, Abrams, and Pearl, you might ask yourself why you are naming third-tier Bush administration officials, all of them Jewish, when the top decision makers, Bush, Cheney, Rumsfeld, and Rice, are Christians. Or take another example. If you think the reason Israel gets so much support in Congress is the money and influence of the pro-Israel lobby, you might be surprised to learn that that lobby ranks 20th on the most recent list of congressional donors, giving away a paltry 4.5 million compared with 95 million that retiree interest groups donated and over $300 million for pharmaceutical lobbying efforts. 4.5 million versus 95 million versus 300 million, yet we're the ones with the power, the Israel lobby, which is Israel equals Jew. It's not all about the Benjamins, no matter what Representative Ilhan Omar might suggest. A moral conviction of our time, especially prevalent on the cultural left, is that the powerful are presumptively bad, while the powerless are presumptively good. These categories aren't just political, they're also social, economic, ethnic. So it's why so many conversations today revolve around the concept of privilege. Anyone with a long view of Jewish history should know how quickly economic and social privilege can turn to political and personal ruin, even in countries where it might seem unthinkable. It's bad enough that the foul anti-Semitism of the right, linked to the themes of protectionism, nationalism, and isolationism, is erupting into the public square like a burst pipe. But also, as American Jews, we find ourselves at perhaps the most successful period in our history. Much of the progressive left has decreed that privilege is a sin and that those who hold power should be stripped of it. For American Jews, this silence about what happened last month is profoundly worrisome. Wow, my reaction is, wow. There's a lot there. I'm sorry it was so long. I suspect that many of these things are familiar and that many of these things you hadn't thought about before. We're going to have opportunities to comment in a second. I just need to take a breather before a shorter version of something similar. I actually experienced, I don't want to say to this level, but the same feeling. I have many, many, many non-Jewish friends, close friends. On this particular issue, I got maybe 2 likes on Facebook, mostly silence all the way around. This is from the CFO of the Jewish Family Service in Seattle. And this is written also right after Texas. And I'm going to not read through the whole thing because it's a little bit longer than we have time right now. But basically what he says is that with the exception of a very few communal leaders who reached out that evening and over the last several days, it's been silent. My social media has been silent, except for posts from other Jews. There's not a mention of it in the Puget Sound Jewish communities, nor in the major newspapers. There's nothing about Jews being targeted. There's focus on other topics, similar to what I read you before. And then what he says is, as I wrote to one friend, Jews are a remnant of a remnant. The entire state of Israel is smaller than Lake Michigan. I cannot visit my family in Eastern Europe. The graves are not there any longer, let alone the people. It makes me wonder if the non-Jewish community understands how personal these attacks are for some of us. The fear is real. The violence is real. And this silence speaks volumes. We talk with all the talk about intersectionality and diversity. I find myself asking if we Jews somehow do not count in these equations when it comes down to it. As an indicator of where we are, There are those who are now comfortable publicly asserting that anti-Semitism is somehow being weaponized. We are supposed to be either fall in line or stay silent. Walk a law around any college campus, and it's easy to see how normalized this has become. You're either for or against us as a stance. That is what's happening on the ground. I would rather start calling it what it really is: hatred of the Jews. Hatred of Jews, not for what we do, but increasingly it feels that the undercurrent of hatred is simply because we exist. We as Jews need to call this hatred what it is and call on those who are not Jewish to do the same. As history has taught us many times, we do not have a choice. Does anyone want to say? I'm going to not read for a while. I'm going to just talk. anyone, if you're going to have to unmute yourself if you want to say something, I'll give you a few. You don't have to. And there's certainly other opportunity. Okay.
Shara?
Yes, who is that?
It's just Ruth Lavore in.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing, I'm not able to see everyone on the screen. Forgive me. Please.
Well, I used the raised hand function also. You might be able to see that.
I'm not, because I have a text in front of me and several things. So,
okay.
Please, okay, go ahead, please.
Okay, when you first listed that survey with the 3 things that Jews have done to avoid visibility, it brought me back to out here at our synagogue. I lead a book group, and we read Dara Horn's People Like Dead Jews, which I highly recommend.
I'm going to be talking about that very shortly. So thank you for supporting them.
And and that was one of the comments that surprised me, that a number of women volunteered that they didn't wear their Magen David or other Jewish jewelry because of fear. Particularly here in San Diego, where we have had a fatal synagogue attack as well. So that's one point. And the other point, that the question that I wanted to ask you was, if you have, and you may in your talk still coming up, suggestions for how, when we're addressed, for example, with what do you think of this or that Israel situation? It used to be, what do you think about the settlements? What do you think about the West Bank? How Jews should respond in a way. I mean, Deborah Lipstadt.
Okay, I'm not going to, forgive me, it's a little bit long of a comment for right now. Some of these things I will cover. Ruth, what you said is very valid. My problem is that this probably should be 2 sessions. Everybody has, these are all important questions and many spin-offs. That question, I've touched it on other classes. My short answer on that particular thing is, first of all, it is fine to feel conflicted on any topic. In my view, on anything, if you are 100% one way or the other, then you're really not informed, because things are always have some complications and facts. If you know nothing, it's easy to have a judgment one way or the other. Having said that, most people who make these comments are working from one line. And it really comes down to reading a little bit and talking a little bit and learning, and then for them to form their opinion. And it's encouraging people to have the next discussion. You can't generally answer it in one sentence. On the other hand, people don't need a whole course on the history of the development of the state of Israel. I'm going to just take that, and please forgive me. I wish I could talk, and maybe we can talk later. I just can't right now. I have to tell you, I've neglected to tell you, this class may go a little bit long. I do have longer time today until 1:30. If you can't stay, you can't stay. I also thought that 1 or 2 people have said maybe we need another second class. We'll see how this goes. But in this particular mix of things, I just want to make clear that it was used to be, and some of us still fall back on this, X number of years ago, we could say there was a distinction between criticizing the state of Israel and criticizing Jews. That line has thinned to pretty much nothing. because in the world that most of us don't live in and probably choose to ignore, there is no distinction. Israel and Jews are synonymous. When there was the war, last year's attacks in Gaza and the bombings, Jews were attacked on the streets of most large cities in Europe and many large cities in the United States. Had not so basically it's seen as one as the same. So even to make that distinction, I'm trying to blur those lines for our purposes today because that's the accurate thing to do. What used to be considered criticism of the country is anti-Zionism is now, in my view, and I am not an expert, but a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And most people who really are on the ground and live with this will say that anti-Zionism equals anti-Semitism. It's an excuse for hatred right now. It's not about Israel. As I mentioned, as I paraphrased Brent Stevens, he said that if Israel ceased to exist, anti-Semitism would find another whipping boy jargon to use. So let's not get caught in that. Right now I need to move on and with apologies. Okay, there are too many examples. When I started this about 3 months ago, I was sticking examples in my red folder, which is my prep folder for Newish Jewish. And the folder couldn't handle anymore. And there are just too many that have happened. But in terms of a 5-minute review session for you guys, I want, excuse me, the common things that have happened over and over again that are common tropes are students in universities being asked not to run for leadership positions or being disallowed to join social justice organizations or clubs even on campus simply because they're Jewish. Perhaps under the guise of because they're Jewish or an Israel lover, doesn't matter. The reality is it's anti-Semitism. That's actually flowing over to some boards in terms of communities, in terms of city councils in this country. We remember the Women's March from about, I'm going to say 2.5 years ago, when quite a few Jewish groups bowed out because they were made to feel not welcome. The recent one, and people from council should certainly be aware of this one, is the anti-Semitic sentiment in Washington, D.C. last fall when Sunrise, the group for basically climate justice, I guess would be the best term, bowed out. They would refuse to participate in the voting rights rally because Zionist groups were taking part. The Zionist groups that they named were the Jewish Council on Public Affairs, the National Council of Jewish Women, and the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. So now they know nothing about any of those organizations except they have the word Jewish. So that was enough. That's one example. There's more on that to discuss because there was follow-up. But I'm saying that these things are happening a lot on both sides of the fence. And this particular one was in progressive circles. If you read the horrific 4th grade exercise, I know you're going to just love this, Rose, where the children were told to, in order to learn something about World War II, to play gas chamber and to turn on the gas, decide who was going to go in and be the turners on, people who turned on the gas and the people who were going to get the gas. The teacher was fired. But the fact that that existed, that happened, that we're talking about 4 months ago, not long ago. Campus exclusion, there are so many examples, but I'm only giving you one. Obviously, I'm telling you with all my heart, and forgive me, I'm emotional, but this can be easily times 20. And whether it be at Tufts or whether it be USC, there's all over the place. It doesn't matter where Loyola, there's too many stories. This particular one was Temple University. This is just this past year. She was recruited for the rowing team, Her name's Sasha. And her roommate was just criticizing everything, like, you're getting dressed up on Friday night and you're not going to a bar, this is crazy, and this, and you don't eat that, and all this stuff. And then ultimately her roommate texted, I hate Jews, and sent her this text over and over again. And so this was this ongoing thing. This is Temple University. And then she complained about the anti-Semitic remarks. And what happened is the friends on the rowing team shunned her and made it clear that they weren't on her side. And the harassment continued. And basically the people aligned themselves with her roommate. And then at the end of September of last year, her mom who's a doctor from in Rhode Island, went to Temple for a visit, and her daughter was a mess, and she was crying, and she was crying as I was leaving her, and she said that she contacted the coach and asked her to get also the housing and asked her to get a new room and to get out of there. And she got no action until she actually followed up with some strong demands. And ultimately, she was moved to a room on the same floor in the same dorm. And she still had to see this person on a regular basis. So that was not, it was not a sympathetic or an empathetic resolution. The cases came to a head, and she actually, with her mom, when she was moving out, went into the her old room to get her stuff out, and the girls told her that she could not be there because these are her two other, apparently there were two roommates in that room. They had filed no contact orders with the Temple police. They wouldn't let her in her room to get the stuff out. So a virtual hearing was set for last December the 20th. And Sasha said that a few days before the hearing, she was given a list of people who could attend. She and her former roommate, the roommate's friend, a roommate's father, the roommate's boyfriend, and the rowing coach, but not her mom. She got people, I've got people. Am I allowed to have my mom for support? Can I have anybody on my side? They said no. There's more on this. The positive, if we have to look for a positive, was social media, in terms of a site that had to be created for folks like this called Jewish on Campus. This is Instagram, and 35,000 people are on this site now, Jewish on Campus. And she got 4,000 likes and lots of messages of support that sustained her. Obviously, she transferred schools. There just last week was something at the University of South Florida about drawing a swastika on a fraternity initiant's chest as part of the initiation, a Jewish kid's chest, or maybe it was his forehead. This is just now. February 11th is when that happened. I'm sorry, forehead in indelible ink. That's what it is. Okay, there's no limit to this. I've referred to somebody once or twice before. His name is, okay, in Judaism, we believe that at any given time there are 32 angels walking the earth, idyllic people who do only good. They're referred to as Lamed Vavniks. Excuse me, 36 people. I said 32. 36 people. One of them, in my opinion, is Rabbi Shmuley Yanklevich, who is an incredible rabbi in every way, and social justice, and there's no way you cannot love him, and he's so cute. But bad news is he's married, and he's 40 years old. But he's in Scottsdale, Arizona, suburban, I guess you would say, Phoenix. And he, aside from donating a kidney and working on all sorts of social, spending much time in Ukraine, just delivering food and appealing now to the organizations to make donations to, and having two foster children in addition to his own three children and every other thing. This is what he posted last Monday on Facebook. What tie should I wear tomorrow morning? Yes, tomorrow morning I need to wear a tie, but not for the joy of leading a wedding, not for the sadness of officiating at a funeral, not for the respect of an interfaith dialogue, nor for the excitement of teaching Torah. I need to wear a tie to go to court to get a white supremacist to stop harassing me and my family. When I was young, and he puts that in quotes because he is young, in some ways it seemed natural and exciting to be an activist. But I realized that if I'm going to take it really seriously, and we're truly working to totally dismantle white supremacy, completely disarm extremists, fully undermine hate, call out dark evil in broad daylight, I really have to be ready for them to come after me. So I'll be in court to fight tomorrow morning and resist the way Jews did for thousands of years, usually without access to courts. I admit that I'm scared to go face to face again, but inspired by Mordechai, who refused to bow to Haman. I will refuse to accept the bullying against Jews, people of color, LGBT friends, Latino immigrants, and Muslim refugees. I refuse to be silent when he's coming. So, what tie should I wear for court? Pray for me. Went to court the next day. The judge ruled in favor of the supremacist for freedom of expression and no credible threat. This was last Tuesday. What he posted was, I can't talk about it. He's been posting a lot, mostly about Save the Children, JDC, and international the organizations to send money to for the Ukraine. That's what he's focusing on this week. But think about it, folks. We know and we hear about people who are denied justice. We are those people too. You heard about this. You heard about Sasha and her hearing at Temple. Now you're hearing about Shmuley. This is a little bit off topic, right? And it's not off topic, but I mentioned it earlier that some of us, us being the world, are unwittingly supporting anti-Semitism. We don't know it. And I share with you or remind you that code words for Jews are George Soros, bankers, socialists, and globalists. Those are code words. And I've seen even recently people who believe they're supporting their political party by forwarding something with those words in it don't realize that they are messaging the people who understand this language that it's the Jews who brought this on. I'm saying this because this just happened with a senatorial candidate in Arizona a few days ago. This is all very recent, too much recent. Amnesty International, some of you know, during a press conference in Jerusalem, I'm going to say this is 3 weeks ago, the UK branch of Amnesty International unveiled a 280-page report bashing Israel. It's nothing more than a false narrative that seeks to delegitimize Israel. What's new? And it makes egregious claims and it demonizes Israel. And this demonization will do absolutely nothing to alleviate Palestinian suffering or create a peaceful environment. It only incites hatred against Israel and predictably for the entire Jewish community. It also incites violence. When I looked at this and I read a few pages of it. You can only stomach so much. I listened to somebody interview the guy on a credible Israeli source, and they said, if Israel does this, what about, and mentioning 7 or 8 other countries that have long stories, and his documented much more egregious elements of the same similar kind of accusation. He said, this report isn't about them. That was his answer to everything. And that tells us also something. If you're singularly focused on Israel, that means you're an anti-Semite. Because it doesn't matter if it's done in North Korea or Myanmar, it's only done in Israel. This isn't about the act, this is about the Jews. Some of you are familiar with the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is not a class on that, but this was a fabricated anti-Semitic text that's been around for about 120 years now, and it was translated into multiple languages and disseminated internationally. And it played a key part. I will do that. Thank you for asking. It played a key part in popularizing the idea of an international Jewish conspiracy. And it remains widely available. And do you guys remember the Million Man March? I don't even know how many years ago it was. I'm going to say 20 or so. Thank you, Elaine. I don't know how many. Is that the men each got a copy of it in their kits. So it's still a thing. At any rate, in my view, when I look at this particular document, I feel this is like an updated version of the Protocols of the Elder of Zion. And in other words, it's another tool for Jew haters to have. On a personal level, in terms of anti-Semitic stuff, it's interesting because a lot of folks will talk about maybe their grandchildren who have something going on campus, or something they heard about second tier. I think many of us have the privilege of isolating ourselves. If you don't choose to isolate yourself, it's out there. Not telling you to go look for it, but it's not too far around the corner. I mean, I've experienced 4 or 5 things in my life. I shared with you months and months ago the fact that when my older son was a summer employee for my company, he had lunch with somebody who told him that the mark on the food is the Zionist conspiracy, the U with the O around it. And I thought he was nuts, and Ben, my son, thought he was crazy. I had no idea that this is a widely held belief to this day, that if there's this certain mark on food, it means these people support the Zionist takeover of the world. And those of you, it's fine to smile, but hopefully you're smiling in discomfort, in horror. I had one experience. This is hard to believe, but I was recalling it. I certainly don't obsess about it. I was the number one guy at the Federation in El Paso, which, since there were only 3 guys at the Federation, it wasn't. But I got the call, "Are you a Jew?" And I thought, "Or are you Jewish?" And I said, "Yes, I'm calling, I am where I am and I am who I am." He said, "I'm going to kill you. And I'm also going to kill President Obama." And I don't remember, and someone said, "Keep him on the line." I don't remember what this is. This is in the year 2009. Um, to make a long story short, he threatened me, and the FBI found nothing. They closed the case. Then I get a call and a visit from the Secret Service. The fact that in the transcript I had reported that he threatened Obama, if a president is threatened, there's a whole different team and they totally tracked this guy down. He's in Indonesia. There is actually a mill of haters that call all over the world to keep the Jewish community on their, nervous. That is their job. Is he going to come get me in El Paso, Texas? No way, Jose. But having said that, the fact that that particular structure exists and that's what they do is a terrifying thing that most of us have had the privilege of being sheltered from, but it does exist. And I just wanted to share that with you. Um, I'm going to paraphrase the next one because I don't know how much more I can handle, this is from, I can't think of his first name. Is it Ellen Greenspan? Um, and this was the Times of Israel, which I read daily and I highly recommend. And they cover great national U.S. news very quickly, not just Jewish news. They're quite on top of things. But imagine a classroom of high school students standing in front of a flag and raising their right hands in unison, outstretching their palms facing down. Imagine that classroom only has one Jewish student in it, who, along with some others, refused to do the salute. And that student is the only one punished afterwards. Okay? The assistant principal insisted that the Jewish kid, apologize to the teacher. Furthermore, the student was forced to move desks closer to the teacher and was not allowed to use his phone anymore when other students still could. It's important to note at this point that salute was caught on tape by someone using a smartphone, and that the Jewish student was reportedly disciplined after refusing to identify who recorded the incident. So who got punished for this particular thing? The Jewish student. Now that's the punishment that we see. There's also this incredible psychological trauma of this. This is so deeply disturbing, and it's current. It's current. Okay. Tropes, general stuff. I don't, if you can think back X number of years, time is a blur for many reasons, COVID being a large one of them. They will not replace us. They will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. It didn't go away with that particular march. It's still out there. But when that happened, and it did say Jews will not replace us, basically Jews ignored that statement. We kept a low profile. We continue to keep a low profile. The press didn't acknowledge the hate, the message behind that. And what we really have is that is an example, and maybe not the best one, but the one that comes to mind to me, friends, right now, is that there was no outrage. And there's still no outrage. And one of our great teachers, who you all have heard me talk about, you know yourselves, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, says that when it becomes normal, said, I should say, he's gone, when it becomes normal, when there's no outrage, that is serious anti-Semitism. And what I see is that, and to an extent, I'm a little bit better than the average bear, but still somewhat guilty. I see that there's no outrage. We're in denial too, as Jews. And Jews in general are in denial. We'd rather just turn the page and minimize it and say that it's terrible. And somehow just saying that it's terrible puts a punctuation mark and you move on. That really isn't enough. I shared with you in the handouts the list of about 100 things to do. I only expect each one of you to do 90 of them. No, I really, there's 5 or 6 different categories. Each one of us can do 2 of them. Any 2, whichever 2 are appropriate to you. That would make a difference. Sharing this information, being proactive. In other words, when you hear a statement like, Jews will not replace us, or the anti-Semitic flyers that went on in Colleyville just last week, I don't know if you read about it. This is in Colleyville, this is Texas. This was the hostage thing from 3 weeks ago, okay? Now there are anti-Semitic flyers being distributed that say, quote, every single aspect of the COVID agenda is Jewish. That's the current scene. So when you see those particular things or you hear those particular words, it's not a that's terrible, move on. It's a call to action. One of the things that we can do is not be an obnoxious Jew. Role model the people the best of our people, because people are watching you. I guess the most proactive thing that I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to do is to be a visible, low-key role model Jew for much of my life. I was thinking about what's an example of someone says, what should I do? I'm sure that all of us have given money to someone who is needy, whether it be a panhandler on the street or someone who reproaches us in a work environment or whatever. And I'm thinking back to something, and believe me, I'm not one of those 36 righteous people walking the earth. I'm not putting myself there. But something that has worked for me in terms of changing attitudes and sending subliminal and liminal messages is to let people know that Jewish people are good. And so periodically when I had my office, someone would come in to the suite and be directed to me, and they need help on whatever. I remember once it was bus fare for something, a poor woman who was going basically office to office to begging, and some people needed food, money for food, whatever. And I, not infrequently, they would say, "May Jesus bless you," and I would say to them, I'm Jewish, so I feel the same for you, but I'm going to say, I'm more comfortable to say, may God bless you. I don't think that that's in any way squelching them, and it might not be words that work for you, but that was a way that I could sneak in the good deed with let's say, a hatch mark in the Jews are good people column for our people. Frequently, I would speak in churches or in public schools and different things. It's an opportunity I thought was well used with Hello Israel in council, which is you're certainly teaching some about Israel, but you're also representing for many of these people their perception of what a Jew is because they've never met any before. So I'm saying be visible when you can, as opposed to retreating and turning the page. You need to instill this pride in the younger people that we know, the people who are more out in the world, is also part of our job description, because it shouldn't be normal and it shouldn't be that's terrible, let's move on kind of thing. Um, I believe that there's right now, and maybe you're starting to believe after hearing me rant for the past 50 minutes, that this is a systemic thing right now. It is, these are not unique uh, 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 aberrations. This is really systemic. Conspiracies, we've been blamed for everything. You heard about COVID, that's nothing new. Sandy Hook was the Jews. Um, 9/11 was the Jews. Global warming was the Jews. Jews will do anything for money. I'm aware of somebody who shared with me that she was in a college party and someone said, "We have kosher wine. You know what makes it kosher? They have the blood of a Christian kid in it." And what did she do? Nothing. She said nothing. Um, I can understand from the point of view of a 19-year-old maybe feeling that way, but if they were prepared, these are people who were her friends, who are her friends. Basically, you say, please understand what you're saying. That isn't true. Respect me, and maybe a one sentence, kind, teachable moment. But those kinds of things are doing great damage because what does it do? It speaks to Rabbi Sachs's comment that it becomes normal to make comments like that. And normal is anti-Semitism. Let's talk. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second, take a breath. Does anybody?
Charlotte, can you hear me? It's Rita.
Oh, Rita. Okay.
Okay.
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
You have to understand, at one time, the Catholic Church was, in the 30s, very anti-Semitic. Now it's the fundamentalist Christians, the Protestants, who are doing this. They tell this to their congregation constantly. So talking to an individual is one thing. I have also Christian friends, but I also listen to Sundays. They are on constantly. The church is on constantly. One church after another, one preacher after another, and they are using code words, and people are picking up on this. So this anti-Semitism comes from the roots of their belief system, and it's not going away until they believe it's going to go away. And I'm very angry about this whole thing, so I'm emotional. And there's nothing I can do except what you say, but it's individual, it's a little bit at a time, and it's not getting to the root of the problem. They don't believe that we are worth saving. They have the, what the heck is that, that mural that they have with all the,
Okay.
you know,
Okay. What you said, first of all, you have every right to be passionate about this, and thank you for being passionate about
and
this.
they don't believe that it's Jews who they don't believe that their disciples were Jewish. They don't believe Jesus was Jewish.
Okay.
And if you don't go there,
okay. All right.
Okay,
So,
I'm sorry.
Thank you. No. What you said was absolutely. I think it's important to hear. It's one of the. I'm not gonna. I'm gonna just say that. First of all, I'm gonna make everybody. I'm gonna request 2 or 3 sentences. I'm gonna, and not long things, but that's one element of this thing, and an important element. But it's certainly not. If they go away, we're still gonna have anti-Semitism because there are absolutely other avenues for it to rear its head. Jackie, you have something, and Cindy.
I'll try to be really concise. Please. Okay, 2 things. First of all, I don't think it's enough for us to speak out. Yes, we should speak out and use, as you said, teaching moments. However, I think a more powerful voice is someone who isn't Jewish, like some Christian Arabs who are speaking out. And I recently listened to an imam who grew up in Turkey and said the Elders of Zion is the book they hand out to children in elementary school. That's what they teach. Okay. And he says he's a recovering anti-Semite. He is reaching out to his community.
You, Jackie.
So that's important. The other thing is, I know a lot of Jewish secular friends of mine who really have no clue about Israel and don't even understand what's going on, or they don't even recognize that Zionism is anti-Semitism. And PJ Library is partnering to distribute 470,000 books for free, published in 33 different languages. It's called Israel,
Jackie,
a Simple
if someone
Guide.
wants that information, you can post it, okay?
Okay, yes,
Thank you.
but I'm
Please put it
saying,
in the
so
memo. Okay.
it's free.
Okay. Thank you. Cindy?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I sent a message when you were talking about the situation at Temple University. And one of the reasons it's so disturbing to me is I went to Temple University for my master's, and there's a large Jewish population. So to me, for something like that to happen in that setting is really disturbing, because it's a place where there should have been a great deal of outrage. And, I'm just shocked.
Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that many Jews are complicit, and I don't blame them because they feel frightened and they don't have the tools. I would say that if we have time today, we're going to talk about some things that are happening. I also want to say that what I just said about speaking out was one quick example. I told you that I sent you 97 of them also, and there are other things that you probably have ideas that you could add to that list of 97. And everything that is said is extremely important part of this, but I don't think we can really solve this today. My goal is essentially to have, give you food for thought, and then possibly do a follow-up on this, or at least personally that you send me your thoughts on this, in terms of, I guess, being more proactive. One of the things that we could be proactive on right now, and I was hoping that this would be publicized a little bit more, in terms of some of the advocacy in, for example, Council and other Jewish organizations, is the Deborah Lipstadt nomination. Anyone who knows Deborah Lipstadt has to admire her for her tireless work, and it's very annoying that her confirmation as a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism has been stalled for 250 days now. And it's basically because at the end of the January 6th riots last year, Senator Ron Johnson said that the Stop the Steal participants were citizens who loved their country and truly respected law enforcement and would never do anything to break the law. And Lipstadt tweeted, "This is white nationalism supremacy, pure and simple." He has held up her confirmation, and people have allied with him. It's become, when I mentioned before that anti-Semitism is becoming weaponized, both sides are using it and calling the other side anti-Semites. We can talk about that more if we had, but you can make accusations about how anti-Semitic the left is. You can make accusations about how the right is, but it's a tool in their toolbox for getting their votes. What they're not doing is anything to get rid of anti-Semitism. It's just a weapon, a tool. And we can't let that stay that way. They need to start doing something. And one thing would be the appointment of Deborah Lipstadt. I don't know if this is going to solve all our problems, but she would be a fabulous resource if she's further empowered. Write your senator, please. Someone mentioned Dara Horn. First of all, she's coming next Tuesday to Cleveland. It's part of the, if you go to jewishcleveland.org and look at the CRC Community Relations Council, it's right on the front page. It says upcoming events. It's free online. It's free to go. If you want to buy her book, it's $1,800. It's available, $1,800, $18, not 1,800. It's going to be streamed. I don't know if it's Zoom or whatever. You can also sign up to hear her. This is another example. Sign up to her even if you're not local. And as I'm sorry, I forgot who the first person was from San Diego who said she's fabulous. And now you're going to get a summary of a little bit of why I think you need to know about Dara Horn, even if you're not able to participate next Tuesday evening. And I would encourage you to find a way. Her latest book is Why People Love, or People Whatever, Love Dead Jews. Why People Love Dead Jews. So I'm gonna. What she says is that Sunday morning after Colleyville, a reporter called her, and she was assuming that the reporter was going to ask her about her opinion on Colleyville, and instead he or she called and asked a question related to a new Anne Frank book. And what she says is that I'm trying to read it in a sentence that makes sense. The fact that this story about a long dead Jew ought to pale compared to the actual news about live Jews that are in danger, but it doesn't, because for decades Holocaust education has been the tool of choice to try to inoculate the public against bigotry. Before I go on this, I defy anyone. I stand with Erica in terms of my Holocaust credentials. Very, very direct in terms of family loss. And I'm the child of survivors. So this is no way to take any kavod, any honor, any respect from any of that history. But my dad told me, and he was right, that the way we make sure Hitler didn't win is that we empower ourselves to go on and build a future and do what we have to make that happen and not dwell on those dead Jews anymore. So coming from that angle, please understand that what I'm going to tell you, I believe is, they're not my words, but they're Dara Horn's. As critical as teaching about Holocaust is, it's not the same as teaching about anti-Semitism. Instead, people mostly seem to think that anti-Semitism consists exclusively of the murder of 6 million Jews. Anything short of that is all in our heads. The feel-good stories people tell about dead Jews make it easy to dismiss the here and now targeting of live ones. Clueless comments such as the ones of the FBI director, who didn't acknowledge the anti-Semitic nature of the Texas hostage taking. These reveal the warped funhouse American Jews now live in. After synagogue shootings in Pennsylvania and California, a kosher market attack in New Jersey, a Hanukkah attack in upstate New York, a rabbi stabbing in Boston, street attacks in New York City and Los Angeles, and countless other vicious assaults on American Jews, this kind of plausible deniability has become a public ritual. Excuse me. When Jews talk about how targeted they feel, a predictable series of objections greet them. My church has security guards too. Think of all the school shootings. Isn't it mental illness? Well, maybe partly, but except why do the voices in these perpetrators' heads keep saying the same thing? Racism against non-Jews is also bad. Yes, but we're talking about people attacking Jews. Are we allowed to talk about that? Okay, some people are not familiar with do not recognize the most basic tropes of anti-Semitism. They're not familiar with the idea that the alleged threat of Jewish power is out there, for instance. As a professor at the University of Michigan pointed out, they think of anti-Semitism solely in terms of violence, not as what it really is, a set of wide-ranging and self-serving conspiracy theories used by crackpots. But everyone knows about the Holocaust. Holocaust education is now its own ritual, where middle schoolers and public figures piously announce that the Nazis were bad. The problem is that this is a rather low bar to clear. We can all pat ourselves on the back for not murdering 6 million Jews. This absurd standard allows people to ignore a pervasive and very current hatred while feeling well-informed. Why should these nice neighbors, or the FBI for that matter, believe anti-Semitism is a problem if there aren't 6 million bodies? I'm skipping. Then she closes this particular thing by saying, so I'm grateful to Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker, the former hostage and currently living Jew, acknowledged how very real the threat to his life was. At a live stream service shortly after the attack on his synagogue, he tearfully announced, I'm so grateful no one is saying the mourner's Kaddish for me. At least that's what I'm told. I didn't tune in because I was talking about Anne Frank. there is, and I'm going to share with you some of this because it's important. There is a conversation with a journalist and Dara Horn in her book about her book, ostensibly People Love Dead Jews, and some snippets of it I think you guys need to hear. A conversation with author Dara Horn in a provocative new book on anti-Semitism, Jewish life, and the uncomfortable truths about both that our society seeks to obscure. This book explores the many strange and sickening ways in which the world's affection for dead Jews shapes the present moment. I hope you will find it as disturbing as I do. That's how the book starts. Our society, Horn argues, prefers to tell stories about how Jews died rather than how they lived because it's much easier to mold dead Jews into martyrs and morality tales than it is to coexist with the living ones. Dara Horn is possibly one of the greatest living English writers of Jewish fiction, and she's written quite a few books that you may be familiar with. She holds a PhD in Hebrew and in Yiddish literature from Harvard. The name of the interviewer is Yair Rosenberg. I don't recall the source. I'm guessing it was Times of Israel, because that's my go-to. One of the fun parts about covering anti-Semitism is that you get to hear the countless excuses that people have contrived to avoid thinking about anti-Jewish prejudice or doing anything about it. So you're told it's fringe, which is not true in many cases. But even when it is, everything is fringe before it becomes mainstream. Then there's the anti-Semitism is not systemic, which is also often false. You literally have entire towns in New York and New Jersey that have recently passed laws to keep Orthodox Jews out. Is the idea to wait until it becomes institutionalized before you decide to do something? Dara, at that point, it's too late. His question is, do you have any other favorite excuses that folks have given for not caring about anti-Semitism? And Dara says, oh, a lot. You mentioned one that I put in my book. It's not systemic. It's a lone wolf. It's amazing how these lone wolves all have the same idea. Or the person is just deranged. Well, yeah, there are a lot of people who you could have killed when you were deranged, but you picked our people. Then there's the Jews are rich stereotype, which is regularly used to justify anti-Semitism. In one book called Jews Don't Count, the author notes that one of the wealthiest minority religious groups in the UK and the United States are the Hindus, and no one's like, well, they have money, as an excuse for prejudice against them. And then there's something about that Israel, which is another great one that I don't really talk about much in this book, but obviously everyone knows about. It's kind of a bottomless excuse. Something I do talk about in this book is explicitly these excuses come out in reporting about anti-Semitism. In the last chapter, I write about the attacks on the Hasidic community just before the pandemic. Looking through the news coverage of these events, what shocked me was how I almost couldn't find an article about them that didn't say something derogatory about the community in the process. Some people shoot up a kosher market in Jersey City, and in the coverage it says something like, there were ongoing zoning battles in the community. I'm almost done reading to you guys. I touched on this a few classes ago. The journalist says there's a chapter in the book in Shakespeare Merchants of Venice, as we probably all know, that revolves around the moneylender Shylock. And Horn, he points it out, and she says this: Shakespeare is a glaring example of anti-Semitism in our literature. For reasons not worth going into, I ended up listening to The Merchant of Venice in the car with my son. And like you said, There are all these apologetics that go into explaining how it isn't really anti Semitic, even though it blindingly is. But what is shocking to me is not just the apologetics, but that I was participating in it. I'm a person with a PhD, and I was like, oh, you know, it's Shakespeare. And look, he has a wonderful monologue where he's like, Jews have eyes, which apparently every English speaking Jew is supposed to take as a compliment. Okay. And then she says her 10-year-old son turned to her and said, Mom, this is the evil supervillain monologue that every supervillain does. You know that. If you were, I'm saying, I've had a rough life, and if you were me, I would have done the same thing. So I'm going to go kill Batman. You're not, you shouldn't fall for it. And he's right. That's what Shylock was doing. At the end of that monologue, don't Jews have eyes and hands and feelings like everyone else? And don't we want revenge like everyone else? That's the evil supervillain monologue, authored by Shakespeare. If you don't see anything else, if you don't see it otherwise, you're just fooling yourself. Now, I'm not suggesting that we cancel Shakespeare, she says, because you can't read as a Jew in any Western language without running into this crap all the time. There's almost nothing where you don't run into this problem. It's built into our world. Are there other examples aside from Shakespeare? Yes. You want to go read Voltaire, you want to read Dostoevsky, Dickens, it's everywhere. You can't avoid it. Even the minor things. I was just listening the other day to Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray as an audiobook. It's a great book. It also has throwaway anti-Semitic passages. And I get to them and I just keep going. I'm so used to doing it. Some people would say we need to cancel these people, but you can't do that. Not just because there's not a it's not a great thing to do for all kinds of reasons, but because there's nothing left to read. There's one more here that I'm not going to read. I'm going to tell you that she talks about. She talks about something that could change, and it's so obvious and it's not going to change. But if you think about history books that kids are exposed to, there would potentially be a healthier approach to the Jewish image that kids are exposed to, both Jewish and non-Jewish. And this is pretty much worldwide. If you look at a middle school textbook, a social studies book, and history of the world, you get possibly a chapter, or even maybe a unit about the Greek civilization and the Roman civilization, and the Egyptians even get their own chapter. But generally, the history for the Jews that you have in the curriculum is a paragraph at the beginning about the ancient Israelites, and then a chapter or a paragraph at the end about the Holocaust. That's it. There's a little bit about the Israelites, and then they get murdered at the end. That's the Jewish history that they're exposed to. Is that the whole story? Well, as you know, and I know, it turns out that there's a whole other story, one that's actually more important and more relevant. And I think that there's actually a story that everybody, not just Jewish students, would benefit from knowing. If rather than here's the Jews, we killed them and that's bad, we were taught about here is this civilization that still exists, that developed as a counterpart to these other civilizations, and that has brought and continues to bring infinite contributions to the world. That would really change the way we think about Jews in a non-Jewish society. We comments, questions? I need a breath. Just a breath. I'm going to have to skip some things because I don't want to keep you here till dinner time. We have to advocate for ourselves. We are often feel totally ignorant or unprepared, maybe a little bit less so now. But keeping our head down is not the answer. And when I say our, I'm certainly talking about more than the people who are in with me in this class right now. Sharing with you a few other random thoughts that may be of use to you is that, in my opinion, tagging along to my comments prior on never again about the Holocaust, is this saying that's been around for 70 years, never again. It's fine to say never again if you mean never again as a prayer, as a hope, and as a call to action. But to end the conversation, say never again, and then move on to making your, I don't know, your tuna casserole, that isn't the way to go. For too long, never again was the response and the finish. I'm suggesting that never again needs to become a call to action. I want to also share with you the concept of Jewish spaces right now. If you attend religious services without armed guards or without a fear of attack, you do not experience religious life as American Jews do, or for that matter, European Jews either. Millions and millions and millions of dollars are spent on security, a lot of this spearheaded by the Jewish Federations of North America, with, by the way, the Cleveland Federation having been the first and the trainer for basically all of the other federations, even to this day, even to last month, in this country, in terms of a light unto the nations, in terms of how to do it right. But think of those millions of dollars that are diverted from educational and cultural and fun and religious causes that could be used. It's our normal. It is normal. My grandchildren and I, as a matter of fact, when I worked in a school in Houston, had to go through bars and had code and I had to zap myself in and all this security. And my grandchildren know no other way. We expect to see an armed guard. We expect to see gates. We expect to be zapped into a room, not be into a school or any kind of Jewish space. I have a student who is not Jewish. She is a wonderful Catholic sister, and she attended my granddaughter's live stream bat mitzvah online, and we talked about something afterwards, got on the topic about security, and she said she had no idea. She had no idea that Jews go through this. She's just one person. I'm saying if she had no idea, chances are that most people do have no idea of what it's like to be Jewish if you live in Jewish spaces, if you work in Jewish spaces, if you go to Jewish spaces. If you happen to be a Jew who doesn't go into Jewish spaces, then you can pretend or be unaware of this reality, but it is a reality. I want to play something because we have very little time and it's really important. And for those of you who joined late, I did get till 1:30 today, so I'm not over yet. But I have to share this with you because I think we need to talk about Whoopi Goldberg and some other something before we leave. I'd be amiss if I didn't acknowledge that. So give me a sec and then I'll share a screen for that. This is a new Jewish podcast called Chutzpah, and Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the ADL, was interviewed, and I just want to get it. It's on 2941. Okay.
I actually think this is a good time to transition into the conversation with Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the ADL, who's going to talk to us about anti-Semitism and the unfortunate ways that some of Josh's sort of imaginings, childhood imaginings, are coming true.
Jonathan, we're very happy to have you. You are, of course, welcome here anytime, but there's a timely reason to have you on today. People have been reaching out to me through Twitter and through emails saying they want to hear the rabbi's thoughts about what happened recently, the brouhaha about Whoopi Goldberg's statements on The View, in which she said that the Holocaust is not actually about race, it was more about man's inhumanity to man.
It's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
And she framed it as being a conflict between two white groups. To her credit, she did ultimately apologize, and you appeared with her on The View to sort of explore the issue. We wanted to discuss with you, and I want to hear also what the rabbi has to say about the issues surrounding the scandal, the controversy, the question. The professional ramifications of what she had to say is that she has been suspended from her job co-hosting The View for 2 weeks. Do you think that was appropriate?
Well, look, I really don't know what ABC's internal processes are. I don't know how the decision was made. But what I do know is that I believe in this concept of teshuvah, which Jewish people are familiar with, this notion, this value of repentance. And I believe that if there certainly are serial offenders, people who are unapologetic in their intolerance and don't demonstrate any degree of contrition. But when you have someone who I think authentically wants to do better, acknowledges their error, accepts responsibility, and asks for forgiveness, I think we need to forgive. I think we're almost obligated, Torah obligates us to do that. So for me, her apology was one that I accepted. Let's acknowledge that not only did she apologize online, she then was, I think, part of the process of giving me the platform to join her on The View and talk about why this mattered and engage in a kind of dialogue. Now, in all fairness, I think that there may be better ways that she and her public could spend the next 14 days. Rather than her being home on paid leave, there probably are better ways to use that to engage in a learning process that's inclusive and encompasses, again, not just her alone, but others. I accepted her apology wholeheartedly, and I'll reiterate today my degree of discomfort with what she said, and then my degree of satisfaction with how she came around.
I had a similar response. Once I saw her on with you, I thought there was a net gain, which is that there was educational aspect and an outreach aspect to exploring. One element of the question is not very nuanced. Of course, the Nazis saw the Holocaust as about race and attempting to commit genocide against what they considered an inferior race. But the actual discussion about race and where Judaism falls in that discussion is more nuanced. I was not so clear myself. I learned through the process, and I think maybe rather than removing her, seeking more opportunities to educate and to discuss would have been a better way to go. What do you think, Rabbi?
Okay, I'm going to move it forward.
Of that framing in terms of net gain.
I can't move it forward without them talking. Forgive me. I'm going to take this to 35:30.
I think all three of us wish that this hadn't happened. I'm sure.
Tell me that we're a race. That's what Hitler said. I don't believe that. This is my faith. I'm not a race. And then other times,
I'm going to move this back a little bit.
People who are about human perfection.
Culture and, epoch, if you will, and in our current moment.
I'm sorry.
But you have someone who I think authentically wants to do better, acknowledges their. This is, again, not just her alone, but others. I accepted her apology wholeheartedly, and I'll reiterate today my degree of discomfort with what she said, and then my degree of satisfaction with how she came around.
I had a similar response. Once I saw her on with you, I thought there was a net gain, which is that there was educational aspect and an outreach aspect to exploring. One element of the question is not very nuanced. Of course, the Nazis saw the Holocaust as about race and attempting to commit genocide against what they considered an inferior race. But the actual discussion about race and where Judaism falls in that discussion is more nuanced. I was not so clear myself. I learned through the process, and I think maybe rather than removing her, seeking more opportunities to educate and to discuss would have been a better way to go. What do you think, Rabbi?
I love that framing in terms of net gain. I think all three of us wish that this hadn't happened. I'm sure Whoopi Goldberg wished that this hadn't happened. But given that it happened, is there a way to get a net gain? As Jonathan said so eloquently, she apologized. She spoke with Jonathan. It was a very long interview for The View. And the idea that she was rewarded, as it were, with a suspension just feels like a swing and a miss. I mean, we Jews, we are not a people who are about human perfection. We are a people who are about human striving. And tshuva, as Jonathan said, is not about becoming some sort of ideal deity, but instead about just doing a tiny bit better every single day. And it seemed to me that's what she was trying to do. And I can't imagine that the suspension helped her in her. And that's some of what Jonathan was saying also in terms of like, how could we have used these 2 weeks in a different sort of way? It leads me to another question for you, Jonathan. One of the things that I found in my rabbinate, and I'm interested in your experience sort of out on the street, as it were, is that one of the problems with talking about anti-Semitism is that it's really hard to define it. Talking about how anti-Semitism functions is extremely complicated, especially because in so many places that Jews have lived, we have been permitted to rise to a certain level of wealth and power. And so it doesn't compute when we think about other forms of hatred. And that even Jews really, they know the events, the Crusades, they know the Holocaust, the expulsion from Spain, but they actually don't know how anti-Semitism works systemically. Has that been your experience? And if so, I don't know, what do we do about it?
Very good, very thoughtful question. To respond to a bit of a circuitous way, like the question to the earlier question, I think what Whoopi Goldberg was doing is trying to take the hexagonal, the 20-sided die of anti-Semitism and fit it into the round hole. Guess what? It doesn't fit. I mean, race is a social construct that changes in time and place and varies by culture and, epoch, if you will. And in our current moment, race is thought about as communities of color, predominantly, if you will, black versus white, which is a function of the legacy of African enslavement in the country and other forces. And it's a real issue. There's no question. The data tells us systemic racism is real. The data shows us that these biases are deeply embedded in many of our systems. While we work to do better, they're still there. But so many Americans today, Shira, and in our time, see these issues of hatred and think about anti-Black racism, with which so many of us are familiar in one way, shape, or form. And so can be hard when you think about anti-Semitism. Well, how does it fit? As I've had people say to me, well, I don't understand. She said the Holocaust was white on white crime. Isn't that true? Aren't you white? I had someone else say, I'm not a race. I'm Jewish, and it's a religion. So don't tell me that we're a race. That's what Hitler said. I don't believe that. This is my faith. I'm not a race. And then other times, we know that anti-Semitism has taken different forms. Sometimes it's racial, if you will, like during the era of eugenics in the Nazi Germany. Sometimes it was faith-based. We know there are plenty of Jews who would never set foot in a shul who still consider themselves Jewish, right? And they say, well, I'm a cultural Jew, not ethnic, not religious. I'm cultural. It's hard to find a cultural Lutheran, right? I challenge you to go find me the cultural Unitarian,
Oh, we're going to hear from them, Jonathan, and I'm going to forward the email directly to you.
The cultural Catholics will probably hear from.
There may be some of those. So, I think all in all, Shira, you're right. It can be very difficult to explain anti-Semitism because it doesn't neatly fit in any one box. It's more like water that can take the shape of any vessel in which you pour it.
I apologize for going so long. We could go for, I'm not anywhere near done. I'll decide how to handle this. I thank you guys for staying with me. A lot of you did. Anybody have any final words? This is a tough thing for all of us.
Cheryl?
Yes.
Erika, I just want to say that if we had all the power, we would have stopped the Holocaust and other anti-Semitic deeds. On the good side, I can tell you, I volunteer at the Maltz Museum store, and there are people not Jewish buying Mogen Davids or the Hamsa because I don't know why.
Okay.
But that's the good news.
There's no question that there are good people, and there's no question that we have allies. That does, but again, I'm going to say that don't fall into the trap of finishing the sentence with that, because that doesn't mean we don't have a real problem. There is a real situation out there. I think that I'm going to probably in the next class, and I can't handle, and probably you guys can't either, another hour and a half of this. But I want to close. There's some dangling participle, so to speak, that I need to close up and give some concrete ideas and some facts. And I also want to tell you that there's some organizations on the ground that are making big headways for right now. I'm going to tell you that I'm so proud of how Hillel has stepped up, the National Hillel, and empowering students on campus. There's not enough time to go into this now, more at another time. In the meantime, I wish you a Chag Purim Sameach. We're going to see each other before Pesach, and thank you all for being with me. And we'll do something fun sometime soon. We'll do something fun sometime soon. I promise. I'm going to stay on, but feel free to sign off. You know.
Thanks for doing it.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thank you.